Hello.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Tiara.
Hi, all.
Um,
Just got the City Councilor's office. Thanks to the folks listening in from that office who were able to get everything situated. We appreciate you. Let me go ahead and text Commissioners Dwight and Garth and see what's going on.
I hope they didn't get frustrated. There they are.
There we go. Let's see. Okay. All right. I think everyone is here. Welcome, everybody. Bit of a bumpy start, but we're on our way. Looks like we have one person from the public in attendance, so we'll go ahead and get this started. This is Working Group 1 of the St. Louis City Charter Commission. Included in our purview is looking at the language in the charter that addresses the duties and role of the city comptroller's office. And we're delighted to be able to have a representative from the comptroller's office today with us. So I don't know if we want to go around quickly and introduce ourselves just for the public record. I can go ahead and get started. My name is Casey Milberg. I'm the policy director in the mayor's office, and I'm the mayor's office designee for the Charter Commission. And Chris, you're right next to me visually, so I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, hi. My name is Chris Grant. I'm on the Charter Commission, and I'm an attorney here in St. Louis and a 20-year resident of the city.
I can hop in. David Dwight IV on the Charter Commission. Thanks so much for your time. I have been doing racial equity work with nonprofits for the last 8 years and have been a resident of the city for the last 10 years. Pass it to you, Richard.
Hi, I'm Reginald Garth, member of the Charter Commission. I am also work in the Office of Financial Empowerment. So just more or less down the hallway from you there, Tiara. So thank you for your time, and looking forward to just having a in-depth conversation with you about the inner workings of the Comptroller's Office.
All right, and then Tiara, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Just share a little bit about what you do in the comptroller's office.
So I am Tiara Thomas. I am the Comptroller's Public Information Officer. I have been in St. Louis about a month now, so I'm a newbie. And so I've been enjoying it so far. So I look forward to working with you guys.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for making time to visit with us. I know there have been some great questions, a lot of curiosity about the role of the comptroller, especially as it's different from the role of the treasurer. And I know that you were kind enough to take a look at the questions that this working group had put together in advance and start thinking about those and putting together some responses to those. So let me go ahead and see if I can pull those up. And similar to the prior the meeting that we had previously with Budget Director Paul Payne for the city, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and read the question aloud just so everybody watching along and the public knows what the question it was, and then Tiara will go ahead and have you provide a response, and then if commissioners have some follow-up questions, they sometimes do, they'll be able to raise them at that point. And then once we work through those questions, if there's any additional questions beyond that, we'll make some time for that. And then at the end, we typically open it up for if there's public questions or comment, we'll allocate a few minutes to each member of the public who's in attendance. So that's our run of show for the day. And let's go ahead and get started in the interest of time. So the first question that was raised was, what is the role of the comptroller's office in city government?
And so, I'm sorry, you want me to answer those, or are we going through the
Yeah, if you
going
wouldn't
through the
mind.
question?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, so the comptroller's office role primarily is to, I'm just gonna read straight from the the email that I sent the group, just so that I don't veer off from anything. The comptroller's office role in the city government includes, but is not limited to, performing all accounting activities, managing city assets, processing contracts and invoices from city vendors, administering federal and state grants, preserving the city's credit, developing financial reports, performing internal audits, conducting the payroll process, and managing bond insurances. So these duties are performed within accordance with our city charter, and so we don't operate outside of the city charter in those duties.
Let's see, how is the role of the comptroller's office different from the work that the treasurer performs for the city?
So the comptroller's office and the treasurer's office, according to our charter, performs two different roles. I know people hear comptroller and treasurer and they hear money and they think it's the same thing, and it's not. And so for the comptroller's roles, they should be over all fiscal affairs of the city and perform accounting functions, manage the city's budget, conduct internal audits, like I said earlier, maintain the city's credit, maintain the fiscal operating policies and procedures for the comptroller's division. And so when you get to the treasurer, you look at his responsibilities. Currently, it's a he. Prioritizing making investments and managing the investor accounts and banking relationships and the cash, pretty much the cash flow of the city. And so from there, you have the treasurer, who is the receiver and keeper of the city's money. And then you have the comptroller, who directs the payments. And so there you can see how they have a relationship with each other, but they perform two different functions. And so the way it's set up there through our charter is to create some type of checks and balances. So the same person who is receiving and keeping the money is not the same person directing where the money is being spent.
Great, thank you for doing that compare contrast. And like I said, that was one of the, I know that there has been a little bit of conversation in this group about that difference. And I think that's a helpful description of the differences between them. You mentioned, of course, the city charter charges the comptroller's office with, managing, the budget process in general. How is the comptroller's office involved in the work of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment?
So the comptroller serves as one of three members of the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, and we, for short, just call it the Board of ENA, which comprises of the executive branch of government. So you have the comptroller, the mayor, as well as the president of the Board of Aldermen, all make up the executive branch, and they also all make up the Board of Estimate and Apportionment.
And so is it accurate to say too that you guys do a bit of like the ministerial function work for the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, coordinating those meetings, materials, things along those lines?
So it also states in the charter that the comptroller's office is responsible for hosting the secretary for the Board of ENA. And so there's a secretary who takes all of the documents that the different departments might want, or anything that is being reviewed within the monthly meetings of the Board of ENA, and she compiles those different documents and have them ready for the meeting. So like tomorrow, you'll see they'll have like an agenda, they'll have all of these different things that they're going over in that monthly meeting, and she's the one who prepares those.
Great.
And so, and clear,
go
she
ahead.
doesn't work for the comptroller, she's the secretary of the Board of ENA. So she services all three offices, but it's housed under our division.
No, I think that's a helpful distinction. Thank you. Let's see, the next question is, does the comptroller's office have any requests for changes within the Charter Commission language governing its operations, whether it's, removal of language, adding new language, anything along those lines?
At this time, she does not.
Okay. Let's see, there are some other questions. I know Commissioner Grant, these were ones that you had flagged, so we're going to move over into those. The first question from Commissioner Grant is, why does the current budgeting process under the city charter work better than if the Board of Aldermen had the authority to increase budget items or create new ones?
And so it goes back to looking at how our city charter has designed this process, and primarily it's to protect and set up an established system of checks and balances and how we handle the money. And so those independent elected offices that make up the Board of ENA help give assurances and protections for our city funding that it's not misappropriated.
Let's see, the next question, sorry, I lost my place here. Okay. The next question is, what city contracts need to be approved by ENA? Is it any contract? Is it only those contracts that exceed a budget line item amount for a year or constitute a new item? Is it contracts covering any unanticipated costs? So yeah, overarching question, what kinds of city contracts need to be approved by ENA?
So I want you guys to follow me. The Board of ENA approves all appropriations through the city budget process. So that's all the money that the city will spend within its yearly budget, okay? Those contracts, all contracts have an appropriation. So your overarching question, what city contracts need to be approved by ENA, it's every contract, because every contract will have an apportionment. And so those contracts, even the smaller contracts, are already approved through policy to not have to go through further approval. As you know, we have those monthly meetings where the Board of ENA go in and they approve the larger dollar contracts, even though there is already a appropriation for it that they set through the city's budget. They will go back through each month and as a new contract comes through and approve those further. However, the smaller ones though, they're protected by policy that they don't have to be reapproved, but they've been approved at the beginning. And that's just for efficiency and moving the budget process along. But the overarching answer is that we approve all contracts as they have an apportionment with it. I'm sorry, I'm very under the weather.
Oh, we're sorry to hear that. And thank you in light of that for being willing to still attend and share the information, yeah, that you have. I know that was a lot of pieces. Does anybody have any requests for clarification, follow-up from that? Okay, not right now. Nice work. Let's see, the next question is, what role does the comptroller play in the disbursement of funds for personnel? And does that slow the process for the hiring of new employees?
So we're talking about the disbursement of funding. And so again, I want to re-emphasize that she, in the budgeting process, is a part of that Board of ENA. And so she's not going to operate outside of that alone. But when we talk about the disbursement, giving out funding, the comptroller's office disperses funds for every department, even including personnel, as we receive the invoices from those departments. And so in the invoicing process, personnel has to send an invoice for $500 for this service. They send it to the comptroller's office. Once the comptroller's office receives it, then we issue out the disbursement of the funding. But we cannot disperse any funding without receiving the invoices from the departments first. And so with that, we do that for every department, but specifically looking at personnel, it does not slow their hiring process down at all.
Okay. The next question that we have is, to what extent can ENA reduce or control budget requests by county offices within the city?
So there are, the Board of ENA can affect the request of some county offices by either increasing or decreasing their budget. And however, by case law, we cannot modify the budget of the circuit courts at all. So that would be your only county office that will have a definite no to us touching or increasing or decreasing their money. But as far as the other county offices, there is a possibility that their budgets can be increased or decreased.
Okay. And then the final question on the list is, does the comptroller need additional power under the city charter to protect the city's credit rating?
No, I think right now the charter lays the foundation for her to perform those duties already. And for any comptroller coming behind her, and it creates that strong structure of checks and balances that the city needs. So no, not at this time.
So that's the full listing of questions that members of the commission have prepared in advance. Do any commissioners have any additional questions that they wanted to bring forward?
I do, and I actually I wanted to get through all the questions first, so that's why I didn't interrupt before. But I want to go back to a few of the topics we covered. The first really just goes to my ignorance of what actually happens at an E&A meeting with you have the comptroller and the mayor and the president of the board of aldermen there. So it seems to me redundant. So I need to be educated on this. Like you've already have, in some sense, a legislative decision by the board to do something, right? And you have the executive's decision to implement it. Why do we need to go through, or what is happening at these board meetings? What discussions are happening? What policy is getting decided that are important, for instance, to like, we need to improve, approve this new contract for a purchase of an IT system?
So based on what I'm hearing from you, I think there might be a little confusion. So the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, they will receive the request from every department, city and county, and they will look at their budget request. And then from there, they will try to put together the fiscal year's budget. From there, once that is approved through the Board of E&A, it will then go through the legislative process. It doesn't start in the legislative process first. And so with that, that is why once it goes through the legislative process, the Board of Aldermen by charter, they can increase, but they cannot decrease certain portions for different departments, different sections. And so when you have and then it's approved. So just like with government anywhere, you want your legislative and your executive branch to eventually come together and agree on something, which is what goes through that process once it gets to the Board of Aldermen. So then you have your yearly budget. From there, it comes back. Let's say there's a $10,000 contract that needs to be approved. That is just your way of really ensuring, not to say it's redundant, but it's also making sure that we're protecting our tax dollars to say, okay, we have this contract. We don't want to make sure it's going to just anywhere. We're going to take a second look at it, make sure there's an apportionment for it, which there should be, and we'll approve it. And so that's pretty much that process. And so to further your understanding and to answer your question, I would invite you to take a look at our Board of E&A meeting that happens tomorrow, and you should have a better and clearer understanding about that.
So, yeah, I guess my question was, I understand the budgeting process, but I'm like, if you're in mid-year, right, you already have the budget for the year, and there's a contract, like we need to buy 10,000 reams of paper, why does that have to go in front of E&A? And when it does, like, because it's already been approved as part of the budget, why does it have to go in front of the E&A? And when it does in mid-year, what sort of discussions are there?
This discussions will vary depending on each meeting. So we'll have to see tomorrow basically what a specific conversation around which contracts make the agenda. So again, I just invite you tomorrow to come and watch the meeting.
One thing, if I could add, so by way of example, the budget doesn't list out this money for this specific contracts, right? So the budget's going to say, this amount of money for, it could say this amount of money for contracted services. But the way the city charter is currently written, we also have procurement laws that we have to follow, purchasing requirements, both in ordinance, and I believe there's some in the charter as well that we have to follow. So the reason that, a department can't just go blindly issuing a contract without a little bit of oversight and approvals gets back to that check and balances piece. So the operationally, you've got the line item that authorizes a total pool funding that say the Department of Health could use for contracted services. So Department of Health would then say, okay, cool, we, have this pool of money for contracted services. Let's say they want to contract services out for, sexually transmitted infection testing services or whatnot to meet capacity. They would then put out a request for proposal, go through the bid process. And then once they have the bid, the bid selected, they would then bring that contract back to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment for like the formal approval of that. It's the same thing for leases, any leases on real property that we would have to re-up. Again, there's the authorization to spend money in the budget, but it's not a blind authorization for contracted services because of the interconnectivity of, procurement laws that we have to follow and other provisions like that.
So I guess my question is, why is that a good thing? I mean, I understand, I guess there's some oversight, but I keep on hearing from other people that, including within the city, that all those additional steps about the disbursement of money that's required really leads to like an incredible amount of delay in the ability to take action. So if you want to hire, if you have a position in your department budget to hire people, not only do you have to go through civil service, right? That's one obstacle, but then to actually get the money allocated for the position so you can spend it on this person can take months. And I hear like that delay is problematic. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe that's not what's happening, or what I'm being told is wrong, but that strikes me as a little, if it is happening, I'm just wondering why what is the balance properly struck here? So,
Are you asking the question about, because these are two different questions. Are we talking about the Board of E&A's process, or are we talking about the disbursement of funding to those vendors that are taking months to be paid? Is that what you're asking?
no, the Board of E&A process. So
So
like
the Board of E&A's process, the money is already allocated in the beginning of the year. That's done. And so as the departments see fit to send contracts to the Board of E&A, each month they're approved. And so that is their portion of that. And so outside of that, the Board of E&A doesn't control the timeline.
Yeah, Chris, I think your question would go more towards the comptroller's role in
Yeah.
processing those invoices and payments out, which I've heard some similar things to you, Chris, in that process.
And so with that, though, as David mentioned, the disbursement of funds is a separate process, which I feel like has more vulnerability to delay. However, as I mentioned, as far as the comptroller's role in the disbursement of funds, we only release the funding as we receive the invoices from the department. So if it takes the department 2 or 3 months to send the invoice, it takes 2 to 3 months to pay the invoice. So as far as our office is controlled, we only have one step in that process, and it doesn't really control the timeline at all.
Yeah, and I think I want to drill in a little bit too on the, there is a distinction that I think you started getting a little bit, Chris, in terms of, there are contracts, like that's one kind of money related piece that the Board of E&A can consider. There's personnel. That's a different, also money related piece that Board of E&A can consider. And, process-wise personnel, is sort of a clearinghouse for a lot of that, not the comptroller's office. The comptroller's office, just like other departments, has to request changes to their personnel structure and submit those, to personnel, and then it goes before the Board of E&A. So that's the extent of their management, really, of the, they don't really serve that same clearinghouse role for all of the other, departments in the way that the personnel division does, at least for positions. For example, right now I'm looking at the agenda for tomorrow's Board of ENA. Comptroller's office is requesting some different position changes. DPS is requesting some different position changes. And all those were done in collaboration with the division personnel. So the comptrollers, as part of the board of ENA is one of the three people who hears those and goes through and approves those. But, in terms of, they're not really a linchpin, in terms of like a clearing procedural sense for positions. And, with contracts, no matter what division they're coming from, to get requests for expenditure and approval of contracts, it doesn't go through comptroller's office necessarily first before going through ENA.
Right. Any further questions?
So I was, you were asked if, you think about any suggested changes to, the charter as it relates to, the budgeting process. What do you say to like the older people who claim that they are, they lack the necessary authority to provide better services or to provide functions of the city that require an appropriation because they are limited in their ability to increase the budget?
I'm sorry, the question about revising the charter, that was about the comptroller's power as well as
Yeah,
anything
so we've
to act.
heard from, older people have been telling the city, the charter commission, not our work group, but another work group, that they feel that the limitation on the power of increasing the budget adversely impacts their ability to pass and implement legislation that provides better services to constituents. And so I'm trying to understand why the controller's office feels one way and the older people feel the other way.
I cannot.
I'm not sure that she can speak to the perspective of older people, so I think maybe a more appropriate framing of the question is just, the comptroller's office experience in that process, but I don't think that we can ask her to speak about the perspective of older persons if she hasn't had those conversations.
I just don't like, what is your response to the fact that older people feel like they're limited in their ability to serve their constituents because they can't increase the budget?
Being that I speak for the comptroller's office, I don't have a comment on that. Only thing that I can say is that the comptroller's office believes that our charter is set up to create a system of checks and balances that gives each branch their own powers to influence the budget. And it's been working for the hundreds of years that the charter has been in existence, and that we're comfortable with that.
I think maybe another way of framing the question might be if some of those changes to how the Board of Alders shows up in that process, which again are not within your power and needing to comment on, but say for example, if there were to be changes to ENA, where a couple examples are the president of the board is actually elected from its members, and that is represented on the ENA board, is one way that people have talked about there being more power for alders to have a say at that decision-making table, or other things like that. Does the office see any limitations on the checks and balances that your office is charged with pushing forward if the board had more power in that way? Does that make sense as a question? Would that be?
From my understanding of the way you framed the question, I don't really think much would change other than the person representing the board would consistently change as they elect someone, but the work of the board would not change, which is what we're okay.
Without getting too into the well, and mind you, I'm trying to remain as neutral as possible because, of course, with me being in the treasurer's office, and I know my office more or less works closely with the comptroller's office, but from my understanding of things, is that this is why it's like if I had to kind of put it into a simpler context, the comptroller is like, say, the right hand and the treasurer is the left hand, if you would. And the two more or less work in more or less tandem to make sure that everything is both flowing smoothly, economic wise or whatnot, because to have, say, one particular office or division that controls not only the incoming of, say, contracts and all of that we're discussing here, to have one entity doing that could be problematic. And we already saw last year what happened to 3 alders who tried to, well, we already know the ending of how that story went, and it was all in the news and everything. So I see the need for the checks and balances. With respect to the office of the comptroller, and in given that, you know, in the role that it does, I'm trying to find the right. I'm trying to trying to frame this the right way. Because I know that there's a number of people that are concerned about the powers of the ENA and the board and rather and the comptroller, and I guess since those 3 make a decision on how those things are kind of handled as far as like contracts and everything are concerned, I thought I heard you say correctly that like at the board of aldermen or whatnot, they can increase, but they can't decrease. Did I miss that, or was there a misunderstanding?
Yes, from my understanding of the charter.
Okay, so they can increase, they just can't make any decreases.
Correct.
No, they can make
No.
decreases.
Oh, they
There's
can make
also the
Other way.
ability to like take a portion, like do a revenue neutral kind of a switch maneuver, you know, to
Okay.
say, okay, we're going to take this pool money and do it for something else.
And they also can't create new line items.
That I know that they
Excuse
can't
me,
create new lines.
my mistake. I apologize.
All right, that I just wanted to be clear on it because I was just like, okay, I thought that it was the other way around, but okay, fair enough.
I apologize. But even with that, back to Chris's point, their power to be able to fund things that they're passionate about or that they feel like their constituents are asking for, as Casey mentioned, there's the opportunity to do that.
I guess,
Okay.
you know, I'm just trying to echo what we've heard or starting to hear in commentary for the public. It's that I'm not aware of many other cities that have a comptroller with as much power as the city of St. Louis. And I'm wondering if that's a good thing, that we should have that, or is that is there something that we should be reconsidering, because there are a lot of cities that are very well managed that don't have a comptroller with that sort of authority. So it
I
is a
don't know
very
if,
unique position. I'm just trying to understand like why it's necessary.
yeah, so it definitely is unique. There are many other cities who are, I wouldn't say, I wouldn't use the terminology of saying that the comptroller has that much power. She's only given the power that the city charter has allotted to her, which I think is pretty evenly split like the rest of the charter to create a checks and balances. However, I would say that this is a unique structure for a city to have a comptroller and a treasurer, but there are many cities and other organizations who are structured the same, who are operating in the same fiscal manner that St. Louis is.
What are some of those? What are some of those cities?
If I'm not mistaken, actually, I would to give you, I know there's about four off the top of my head. I don't want to misprint them, but I can send them in an email
Okay.
in the morning and get them to.
I mean, that would be good. I'm just interested to like other cities that have something similar to like a comptroller on like a board of E&A who is exercising essentially this sort of extra oversight step to preserve the credit of the city. Because
Commissioner Gray,
I look at other cities and I just don't see that. I look at Minneapolis or Denver or Kansas City or Nashville, and they don't have things like that. And you know, part of what we're sort of tasked with doing is like, do we need to modernize somehow? So
you mentioned that you have some awareness of other cities with comptrollers where the power is different than those in St. Louis. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Give some examples from the research you've done.
So what I was saying was,
Oh, no,
the
sorry, that was directed to Commissioner Grant, not you. Sorry, yeah.
that,
In
that
case you where they don't have a comptroller or where
Oh, no, the ones that do have the comptrollers
and-
where the comment was, there are other cities that have comptrollers, but with not as expansive, extensive, whatnot, you know, whatever have you, that power. So, I was just wanting some, just for the whole group's awareness, just some
Sure.
examples of that.
I mean, there are others, we don't call them comptroller, they're typically called auditors, right? In other cities, someone who has some,
public advocate.
yeah, some oversight over what this disbursement, right? That's very common. You have to have, like we talked about before, left hand and right hand. You got to have someone watching the money going out and someone watching the money coming in, and it can't be the same people. And you've got to have make sure that someone who's looking at disbursements are ensuring that the money is actually going for the purpose that it's intended, right? But what we don't have is what I don't see in many other cities is like a board of E&A where there is someone like the comptroller who's also involved in like essentially more of a policy making role, right? Who is doing two things, like involved in the actual budgeting process, determining how departments should be funded or what services should be funded. And two, looking over these contracts and deciding that perhaps a contract is not consistent with an earlier appropriation, and so therefore, you know, not approving it. That has a policy making role, and I haven't done a lot of research, but from what I could tell, looking at the materials we've been given, you know, the model charter and what happened in Kansas City and other cities don't have that.
So to address those things. So you said the last thing I'm hearing that you're saying that the comptroller has that policy making power as far as it goes to a contract who might not have an apportionment with it, and then being able to unapprove that or disapprove that. That particularly, as I mentioned earlier, every contract that's to come through E&A should have an apportionment already with it. So you shouldn't run into that too often. However, again, I want to emphasize that the comptroller herself or the position itself does not operate outside of E&A. So we're having this conversation and we're saying the comptroller, but when we're talking about it in a broader term, it's really the board of E&A. The board of E&A has the policy making function when it comes to the budget, not the comptroller herself. The comptroller herself can have policy making power for her division as does the treasurer for his division, or the director of personnel for her division. They can do that, but as far as the budget goes, that is the Board of E&A that is consistent of the mayor, the comptroller, and the president of the Board of Aldermen. And so you won't have, when you talk about the power, having that much power of the comptroller, she doesn't have that power individually. That's not her power. That is the power of the Board of E&A.
I'm just sitting here looking at Google, a simple Google search you'll find a number of cities that do have a comptroller. Baltimore City, New York City, El Paso, Texas, Grand Rapids. There's quite a number of them. We can look up here and find out that they both have a comptroller and a treasurer.
Yeah, but I don't
That's,
know,
yeah,
Commissioner Garth, that they have like a board of E&A. Yeah, I think that's maybe my point wasn't clearly communicated.
No, because it does sound like the point that you're making is just kind of like why the E&A as opposed to comptroller when we're talking about the comptroller's office.
I understood it as we're depicting the comptroller's power, not necessarily, we haven't been talking about the Board of E&A.
Okay, well, we have 2 members of the public in attendance. We traditionally make time for them, about 2 to 3 minutes, to share some public comment, feedback, or ask a question. If you are, let's see, if you are in the public and you're hoping to be able to speak or make a comment, would you go ahead and raise your hand? Well, there we are. Okay. Mr. Connolly, I'm going to go ahead and click the loud talk button. We'll go ahead and do 3 minutes, and you can go ahead and unmute anytime you are ready to do so. Mr. Connolly?
Yes, speaking.
Hi. Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with my camera here. Let's see. Just bear with me a second. Maybe I'll go without my camera. Spare you. Yeah, so I'd like to make some comments on more general observations on the functioning of E&A, rather than it's kind of the structure of the comptroller within the realm of the charter, and the lack of transparency about the Board of E&A. And this is not a reflection on Ms. Thomas here. Am I getting your last name right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's not a reflection on you at all, but we've got a system where there's a 3-member board and it's staffed through the comptroller's office. And the agenda for tomorrow, if you pull it up on your computer, the agenda for tomorrow has like 10 or 12 items. And, you know, items 1, 2, and 3 are contracts, leases, transfer of funds, between departments and within departments, and there are no attachments. None of the exhibits or the actual language of the resolution are included. So fundamentally, the public doesn't know what the Board of E&A is voting upon, and I contend that that's a violation of the state sunshine law. You know, you have a Board of Aldermen agenda. It's clear. There are links to board bills. It's clear what people are voting on. So I find that hugely problematic. If you notice the agenda, there's no approval of minutes on that agenda. My understanding is that the minutes are approved between the meetings. So there's no approval of the minutes. And Commissioner Grant, you were referencing or asking the question, what kind of discussion happens? Well, the format of the meetings, the mayor reads aloud the content of the agenda verbatim, and then accepts a motion to vote on it. And occasionally, one of the members will ask that an item be removed from that consent vote and discussed separately. And that happened frequently. President Reed was on board of ENA, I don't know, half the time there'd be items removed and there'd actually be some substantive debate, discussion. Since his departure from the board, it very, very rarely happens as any discussion. And occasionally at the end of the meeting, one of the members will make some comments about something that's been voted upon. But it's more as we're informing the public that we're now, utilizing Department of Health to provide services within the City Justice Center. So it's almost used for political posturing, when it's convenient. But the majority of the time, there are all kinds of contracts getting approved, and unless a reporter combs through, because reporters can get the information at the day of the meeting, and I've spoken to reporters who've obtained it, but for the public to get that packet with all the exhibits in it, you've got to submit a sunshine request, and sometimes the records come through after 3 or 4 days, and sometimes it takes literally 3 or 4 weeks. So, in terms of the intent of the sunshine law, the information, once it's so far away from when the meeting happens, it has much less impact if it's released. So those are some of my general observations on how the Board of ENA functions, and basically whatever charter changes are made, and there should be, some very specific requirements on, transparency and complying with the state law, because I don't believe the sunshine law, the Board of ENA is in compliance with the sunshine law. And I think that's something that's shared by all 3 members.
Well, thank you for that. I did take down your concerns. I also looked at Casey. I think more so his questions about the sunshine law should more so be directed towards the legal department, to more so pick that and have an answer if it's in compliance to the sunshine law or not. That's not a function of ENA to know, well, not to know what the sunshine law is, but to say what's in compliance and what's not. But also I did want to correct one thing that you said, Jared, about the Board of ENA coming from the Comptroller's office. The Board of ENA is the Board of ENA independent.
Right, yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry if I misspoke there. But the Comptroller's office is essentially the staff to the Board of ENA. I mean,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The Comptroller's office serves essentially to staff the Board of ENA in terms of they retain the records.
The Secretary of the Board of ENA maintains the records of ENA.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Connolly? Okay, Mr. Connolly, thank you so much for making the time, especially during the workday, to attend and listen in. We very much appreciate it. And thank you very much to Tiara Thomas from the Comptroller's Office, being about 1 month in. We're certainly very appreciative of you diving in. And I don't believe I said this at the outset, but it's my understanding that you will be a regular fixture at the Charter Commission with us as the designee from the Comptroller's Office to the Charter Commission. So welcome aboard. We look forward to collaborating with you and having conversations with you. And okay, well, if there's no other comments or questions. Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to
ask. I know I mentioned being able to pull cities that do have both a comptroller and a treasurer. Do I still need to send those, or are you guys okay?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and just have you send to the Charter Commission staff. They're sort of the keepers, the repository of research and other things that different guest speakers or whatnot put together. And so they'll put that into the file system that we all access.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time, and everybody have a very safe, joyful, and happy holiday season.
Thank you.